All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester at Durham, and it's week 3, part 2 of our broadcast. And today we're going to continue with the work that we did yesterday, which was working with ECMAScript 2015 and beyond to create a contact list. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and that's going to be part of your in-class exercise for this week. All right, so we'll talk about what we've done so far. So last day we kind of talked about ECMAScript 5, the difference between ECMAScript 5 and 6, the evolution of JavaScript. In the last video, we also described object-oriented programming and the differences between maybe what you know already in C++, C#, and Java, and OOP and ES6 and how that looks, ES6 and beyond. We also split our code across multiple files, and today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using something called local storage and session storage to store new contacts. We're going to do that, and we're going to create a contact list page that's going to show those contacts dynamically. All right, and we're going to do that with JavaScript. So lots of exciting stuff today to hit. So let's go back and start with our project from the previous day. So again, what we're doing is we're using our GitHub repo. So if you go to GitHub, and if you look at Durham Programmer for this one, we are in class exercise 2Bs. That's where we're starting. So if you're new to the party and or you missed the last day, for whatever reason, please download the code from here and start from there. So this is our starting point for today. Last day we also went live on GitHub pages. That's also something we should mention. So if I click on GitHub pages here, it's going to show us our deployments, and the latest deployment is here. So this is showing us live how it looks live on the web, and this is part of your requirement for and I say lab 1 because that's what it's for. It's really just to help you with your lab 1 and in-class exercise 2. And that's why I put it there. So that is what it looks like live, and we're going to continue to to deploy live. And in fact, it's automatic. This idea of continuous deployment. As soon as we update our GitHub repo, then it continuously deploys live to the website. And that is kind of a modern and common theme nowadays for web development. We use continuous deployment, continuous integration, or CI/CD is what it's called, kind of throughout our development process. So that's what we're doing. So it's I've kind of buried it, and it's been an underlying thing for me. So it's not, I haven't really highlighted it until now, but we're going to continue to see that we're going to deploy things live. And this is a great way of working, especially if you're creating a staging site for your client. And staging site is kind of the the place where your client can see what you're working on. As an example, a little dangerous sometimes when you don't want to show them everything, but it's also a place for you to do development work on before you cut over to the deployment site. So let's say you deploy something live, and or you distribute your code live, and that's how you would do it. You cut over from the previous website to the new one, right? And in order for you to do that, you have to test it live. Working locally on your machine, it's part way, but one thing to always do is test live, just like you would do if you're making a mobile app. You can test your mobile app on a simulator, but it's never as good as actually working on the actual device itself. So it's kind of similar concept here. All right, so that's what we're working on. And so again, let's go back to our code. So this is where we were left off. So I'm going to go to Control Backtick and bring up Light Server for us, just to kick off the server so it looks like works locally for us. And what we're going to be working today is in this space right here. Let me just show you. So if I go to Inspect, so far we've been looking at the Elements tab as well as the console as an example, right? We can see that console's trying to load a favicon. We'll kind of solve this issue later on. We looked at sources, and this tells us when things are up to date. network and performance, basically, and memory are all ways of metering our performance for the website. So we're not going to really touch those this semester. Application is where where we can use something called local storage or session storage. Okay, so you can see here I've already got some stuff in the local storage, and what you can do is I'm just going to delete these. Just going to start over. I'm going to show you how this is all done and what I did for all this stuff and how I came about to put this stuff in place. So there's a lot of little steps for us to get there, and I'm going to go a little quicker today than normal. And Muzdaz asked, is it possible to deploy the website which has a database? Well, on GitHub, yes, you can, GitHub pages, but the database has to be hosted somewhere else. So as long as it's hosted, let's say on someplace like MongoDB Atlas, or if it's an online database somewhere that's hosted somewhere else, yes, you can link to it for sure, but you can't host it on GitHub pages. How did I get to the storage and the inspect element? I missed it. So yeah, you go to inspect and you see that where it says application, and then you go in here and then you can see local storage and session storage. So storage is something that has been added to our to web browsers for a while now. And just to show you what this looks like, if I go to a site called caniuse.com, caniuse.com basically tells you if there's a feature that is available that's new, that's usable across different browsers. So we're going to go to this site a couple times. And so, for example, if I say something like local storage, right? Local storage is an API, right? And you can see it's a window API that is pretty much supported across all browsers. So this is how you can check a feature. So go to caniuse.com and then do that. And there's also something called session storage, which is totally different. Well, it's not totally different, it's a little different. And session storage, again, is supported across most browsers, as you can see, for all the common versions. So these are common versions in terms of IE, Edge, and so on. And notice that earlier versions of Internet Explorer and Chrome and Safari way back when didn't support some of these features. But now, if you look globally, 96% of browsers that users are using out there support local storage, let's say, and session storage. So what is the difference between local storage and session storage? So if I look it up, so if I go local storage, right? So if I say, and there's actually a link, but let's go local storage JavaScript. And up online, we can always go to developer.mozilla.org. They have a lot of information about local storage and a bunch of different things here in session storage and everything else, actually. So it says it's a read-only area, typically, property that allows you to access a storage object for the document's origin, the stored data saved across browser sessions. That means that if I close my browser, it's still okay. It stores it inside of your browser cache, which is interesting. And it's similar to session storage, except that while the data stored in local storage has no expiration time, data stored in session storage gets cleared when the page session ends. That means when the page is closed. And that's the difference between session storage and local storage. So you might think this is a little dangerous, but actually it's happening to you all the time. Anytime you go to a website, a lot of times what they do is they store stuff in your local storage specifically for that website. And a lot of times, or session storage. And the way they use that is for things like your shopping cart. Example, if you go to a site and you put something in the shopping cart, and you know, there's two ways it can happen. If you're logged in and you have an account, then the account itself, you're as a member, a logged in member. Let's say, for example, Amazon stores your you know, your shopping cart inside of your account information. So it spans across different devices. Like example, if I use it on mobile phone, then I can still see my shopping cart on the mobile phone app at the same time that I can see it on web app. But there are some sites that don't do that. What they do, instead of storing it, they make you come in as a guest user, and you can create a you know, a shopping cart, And the shopping cart can be stored in either in some temporary location, for example, someplace like session storage. So if you close your browser, the shopping cart's wiped out, as an example. But if you kind of do some surfing and come back, as an example, then what ends up happening is it's there. You can still see your shopping cart if you switch pages or whatever. And some people go as far as putting it inside of your local storage. But local storage is almost like a little bit more intrusive because it can last forever, right? Until you remove it from the shopping cart. So we'll kind of do that. We'll start today and we'll do some basic write operations. And next week we'll add to this example. And so that we can describe how we can use this, and it'll give us a good vehicle for using object-oriented programming technologies and techniques that I've described, and adding to our contact class in more detail. That's kind of the contrivance here. So I'm kind of making it so that we have something to work on, is what I'm saying. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. So can I use is pretty cool. Again, one thing to note is that it includes all new features. So if I wanted to do something like enum, if I put enum in there, so enumerate devices is what it says. And if I scroll down, property is enumerable. That's a different thing. And you can see that if I type anything in here, it'll try and search for any kind of feature that's related to this, right? Interface number and so on. So there's a lot of new features that might be shown here that aren't available as well. Let's say, for example, if I go module, right? So module, JavaScript modules, which is like a dynamic import, you can see that some browsers don't support that even now. Like, for example, if you look at IE 11, which is still being used today, believe it or not, it does not support the module or dynamic import, right, as an example, but most other browsers do. And it kind of shows you how this is done. If you actually look at some of these features down here, you can inspect to see how this looks. Same thing with the Flexbox layout module. If I just put module in there, right? JavaScript modules via the script tag. So I can do something like script and then type module. So we can talk about this as well later on, and so on. There's tons of things that you can look up. Anything that has module in it, and you can see that either that there's partial support or full support or no support. That kind of thing. So it's kind of cool what you can look up here with caniuse.com. All right, so that is can I use, and let's get back to our coding now. So yes, so we have the ability to add our sites in our contact, and we're doing it kind of in using our contact.html page. So if I go back again to my site, so let's go to localhost 3000. Here it is. And you can see here, if I go inspect, right, so here we're inspecting. And again, now if I go back to my application, it's clear. But one thing we can do is if I go to contact us, and if I put in a contact, let's say, for example, in my console here, if I put a contact like, my name, Tom Smith, and this is weird that I got this, enter the appropriate contact name. And let's suppose I go my contact number, which is, let's say, which we've seen before, and tom@example.com. And if I send it, you're going to see this information down here. And this is great. This is great information for me if I just want to output it to the console. But I really don't want to store my information this way in my application storage. I don't want to do that. Why? Because I'm going to store additional information that I don't need. Like, I don't need full contact, full name and stuff. I need to do something called serialization. I need to serialize my information, or basically encrypt it in a way. And we're not going to encrypt it, but we're going to serialize it. Serializing means putting it into a form that we can store it, perhaps in a comma-separated value format, and then kind of load it up again in the same kind of way. So the best thing for us to do is create methods or functions inside of our class that can serialize and deserialize data. Okay, so that's where we want to go with this. There's one other thing we can do. We may want to also eventually convert this data that we have in here into JSON format. JSON format being JavaScript object notation. So we may need another function, a third function, that allows us to translate this into JavaScript object notation. So let's do some of that work now. So I'm going to go into the contact.us.js page, which is where our contact class is lives right now. And notice that we have a toString method that we used last day, where we created using a template string we used interpolation to create and we're going to use string interpolation and the template string kind of extensively today in different functionalities. We have a toString method. So what I want as well, other than the toString method, is a couple of additional methods. I'm sitting in the contact.js file, which is where my contact class is. That's where I'm working in right now. So I'm at the bottom of the file, and I'm going to add a couple of empty functions that I'm going to fill in later. So one of them is I want to do a toJSON function where I can return a JSON object. Okay, so that's what I want to do. I also want to create something called serialize, a serialize function that allows me to serialize my data right into a format that I can store it in session storage or local storage. And then I need to deserialize my data. So serialize and deserialize. I need to deserialize my data. Serialize, maybe if I spell it right. I can bring it back into my contact as an example. And when I bring it back into my contact, it can fill in the full name, contact number, and email address by reading it from session storage and local storage. So these are kind of a few things to do. In order for us to support this, sometimes what I need to do in my constructor, as an example, you see in my constructor, I require right now a full name, contact number, and email address, right? But what you can do in the constructor, just like in other languages, is you can take default values. So I can say something like, you know what, if you don't enter a full name, and by the way, you have to add them all, just like normal. So you can put in an assignment operator in here that says basically, hey, if you don't give me a full name, I'm going to give you a string back, right? Either way, it's going to be a string. So I can do that for all of them. So I can say that, hey, if you don't enter something, I'm just going to enter some empty string values. Worst case scenario, if you just create the object, let's say a new contact that's empty, right? Just to to be able to create an object first and then add to it later, which is something that we're probably going to have to do for the deserialization step. So all I've done is made, kind of optional, if you will, or default values. And when I do that, as soon as I assign the string, it actually sees full name, contact number, and email address as string now. One thing to also note is I got you guys to download and install something called document this. And what you can do with document this is you can put / and 2 asterisks, so 2 of these, and press enter. And what this will do is it'll show a couple of things. It'll kind of try and fill in the types for full name, contact number, and email address. And you can actually put in the types yourselves. For example, I can say that each of these types are strings. So again, this is just documentation. It's not like going to change the code. And then you have a section up here, a little extra asterisk, and the extra asterisk you can add to it. And you can put in the constructor. So contact class requires and by the way, these are optionals. So you can see the parameters. I mean, I don't have to kind of put in kind of requirements for my constructor because it's going to come up. But so one thing that you can do is if you put @ sign and param and then these curly braces, this means required. But what you can also do is you can make them so that they're if I put them kind of in square brackets, it means optional a lot of times. So depending on the documentation system, for us, we're going to just put curly braces right now, which are going to show that they're required. So that's what's going to happen. So now, as an example, if I create a contact in my app.js, again, all I've done is added these little curlies here and we're going to describe all of our methods this way, by the way. If I go back to my app.js now and I scroll down to where I have my display contact page, and I go where I created my contact and I hover over it, right? Then you're going to see exactly that. You can see that now it looks like I have this little question mark and it detects these things in our Visual Studio Code as strings. This is really great. And it also talks about the parameters that you're required: full name, contact number, and email address. But notice the question marks here mean optionals. That's what it means. So I can if I want to. If I don't want to, they don't have to be in there. All right, so that's what question marks mean. So that's really great because it gives us good code hinting again for even our own stuff. So not necessarily Java docs, but something like that, Nick, right? So to make it easier for us. And we need it because, you know what, when we're doing, especially with JavaScript, we really need support when it comes to coding. So that way, if I pass on my code to somebody else, if I make a class and I want to make it usable by somebody else, then I want you guys to be able to use it, right? So that's something that I want to do. So that's our contact so far. Let's go back to my app, our contact.js. So that's the first part. I modified my constructor so that it takes optional values. Okay, part two, let's add JSON. And what JSON looks like, and let's do a little example in my app.js for a second. So go back to app.js. And at the top, let's suppose that I want to create an anonymous object. And JSON allows this to happen. So I can say something like, outside of my iffy, if I want to say something like, let my contact, and follow me here, I can make it so it's like this. If I say just do this by itself, this format in JavaScript, if I hover over, it says, well, it's of type object. Actually, that's what it means. But this is equivalent to doing something that looks like this, new object. Okay, it's equivalent. One is, first part is it determines this as an object. An object means a kind of an anonymous object. It's not made of any type. It's just the default superclass. Think about the object of all objects, the root of all evil, if you will, of all of our object-oriented programming. This is what every other object derives from, okay? It's the object superconstructor, right, that I can use. So I can do this, or, which is exactly the same thing, I can create the object by doing this. And by the way, this is more popular than new object. Just letting you know. So I can do this, and I can add to it immediately. So I can say something like, hey, you know what? I want to add a property. So I can add something like first name. I'm just pointing this out so you see the format. Not because we're going to use it this way. And I can give a property like Tom Smith, right? And I can separate the properties with comma values. So I can say something like, you know, first name, instead of first name, we'll call this, full name. And let's suppose this is my contact number. You've seen this before. And notice I put everything in quotations because that's what it's required. 165555555. And then my email address. So this is like doing a contact, but it has no relation with the contact that I've made already. So in other words, this is literally an anonymous object, right? That has nothing to do with my contact class, but it looks the same, right? And if I was going to transmit data, as an example, you know, to another system, and I wanted you to retain the structure as an example, then I would pass in full name as an example. And notice when I hover over it, it says my full name is of string type, my contact number is of string type, and so on. And if I hover over my contact, you can see now that my contact is a object of that includes full name, contact number, and email address as properties. So that's another way of making objects in JavaScript. And that's actually a very popular way of doing things, especially if I want to create something that I'm going to send to a database. I may want to create it just like this. But obviously, it's better to have a class, all right? I'm saying it's possible, though, to do this. And if I wanted to make a function, let's say, for example, I wanted to make a function called, you know, my contact says hello. So it says hello. Well, you can actually point this to an anonymous function. So you can say function, right? And you can just define your function right in here, right? Which is kind of a weird thing. But what this does, this says hello function where I want to do a console log, right? That says, you know, my contact says hello. Let's even use the template string thing. So we can say that, you know, full name, right? And then says hello, right? So that's my little method that I can include here. I can actually do this, comma separate, I create a little method, And this little method now belongs to this object. So I can go back to my object and you can see, sure enough, here says hello. So, I mean, it's kind of weird, right? It's kind of like, I mean, when you look at this for the first time, if you're, sorry, this doesn't belong. If you're a programmer and you look at this thing, you're like, whoa, this is not proper. This is like, what the heck is this? This is like a list of strings, right? But actually, no. What this is a list of properties on the left and a list of values on the right. And our value can even be a function, or, which is even, let's take this a little further, I can have another object inside of it. Like, for example, I can say some other object I can embed inside this object, right? So I can say that this object is equal to some other object that's inside here. And this object here can have other properties, like, for example, some kind of contact list, right? I can go even crazier with this, which is I can make it an array, right, of objects, a contact list. So I can say something like, or we'll call it a friends list. Let's say, for example, my object, my contact has a friends list, and it's an array of friends. So let's say, for example, maybe I know Peter Parker, and maybe also I know Tony Stark, and maybe also I know Stephen Strange. These are my friends, apparently, right? So you can see that this is, I mean, I can do a lot of stuff in here. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because it's going to be quite complex, that the JSON object, which is what I'm showing you, which is what it is. And if I hover over it, that's what it looks like. It looks like I got a full name, contact number, and email address that are strings. I got a says hello function, and I got some other object that I've made, which is going to also include a string array. All right, so lots and lots of power that you can do with JSON objects. And usually what we can do is we can use this structure to store it in a database, or for a lot of other things we want to put together. If we want to put a dynamic object together that has no class whatsoever related to it, and I can do this in any way, and I can make every object different, I can totally do this, and this is where the power and flexibility of JavaScript comes in. Definitely don't want to take this away from JavaScript, because this gives us so much possibilities, so many possibilities to do it this way. So I just wanted to show you this. We're not going to do this, but this is kind of what we want to do with our JSON object that is here in my contact class. So in my contact class, I want to convert our data potentially to JSON. So the way to do that would be, I'm going to return a JSON object, right? So you can do that with curly braces or an object. That's what I'm going to return. And notice what I can do is where I say return full name and blah, blah, blah. I want to do this, but my JSON object is going to be more in line with what we just saw. So I'll say something like full name, which is the property. And then I want to interpolate. So I want to say this dot underscore, or just put in full name. So I actually I kind of use the value that I have in my class already in here. Okay. And then I can just comma separate everything. So I can say full name and then contact number, which is this dot contact number, and as well as email address. So what I'm doing here is I'm returning a JSON object as opposed to returning a string value. So that's what this toJSON does. And it returns a JSON object out. And if I hover over this, you can see that, sure enough, it returns an object. It's not a contact. I've converted my contact into an anonymous JSON object that maybe I can use somewhere else. And you can document this. So I can say, let's use document this. And what it does, it says a couple things, right? Members of contact, right? It doesn't take any variables. It returns, what does it return? It returns an object. That's what it returns, a JSON object, right? A member of contact is interesting if I want to put that in, but I don't need member of in this case. I can take that out. And then I can say something like this method returns a JSON object, right? Which is what this is, JSON object made up of the properties of the contact class, right? So that's what it is, an anonymous JSON object that does this, okay? So that is what I could do. I can kind of return JSON. So I want to say, take my object and convert it to JSON, right? Which is very popular in order for me to do if I have some kind of data class like a contact. Okay, so that's the to JSON method. How about serialization? So serialization, like I said, I want to convert this into comma separated values. So what I want to return here is not this necessarily, but something like this. I'm going to copy this whole thing. It's still going to be a string type. But instead of returning full name, blah, 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 all I want to return is the data. So I want to return my full name, and I don't need any comma, any kind of formatting. So a comma and another comma in between. So this is what my comma separated values would look like. So full name, contact number, and email address. This is how I would serialize my object. And if I return this, this is kind of a way of storing my data kind of in one blow. And this is kind of the way you can do it. You can add more detail here, obviously, if you want. But however you serialize it, you got to read it back in once you get this object back. All right. So serialize, again, if I document this. So again, there's two ways to do it. I could do it like this, or I could just use document this. So let's just show you this. So I can say document this, which is a thing that I've added in. And it says, okay, it's a member of contact, yes, but it also returns something, and this returns a string. I can actually tell when you're looking at this object, what it returns now, right? So it returns a string. And I can also say that this method converts the contact into a comma separated value string, let's say. Okay, so that's what this does. And then I want to deserialize it. I want to take an object that's a string and put it back into my contact. So here in deserialize, I want to take some kind of data object, right? So something like serialized data. So serialized data, right? Now, again, you could put serialized data. Let's just call it data. That might be just easier, right? So data, and then what you can say is, okay, so how do I read it in? So I got my data, and what I want to do is I want to break up that data, assuming that it's a string type. And by the way, you can do some ducks, right? This returns a string. This would return void. This would return a string, right? An object, right? So this would return void. Let's try this out. So we'll say document this. Instead of the parameter being data, which is nothing, any, star means any, we're going to specify that the parameter is of type string. So if I hover over this now, it says its data is a string type. All right, that's what I want. And the return type is void. So I can say at return, and then in curly braces, void, which means the function doesn't return anything back, right? So it kind of specifies what this is, which is pretty cool, right? And then what we can do is, before we serialize it, we can put what the comment is. This method takes a serialized data string, serialize, or comma separated. We'll put comma separated data string, and assigns the values to the contact class parameters or properties. That's what it's really going to do, right? So I deserialize, I take the data, turn it back into properties, right? That's what I want to do. So the first thing is, we know that the data is a string, and so what I want to do is I want to create an array of kind of a data, a string array is what I want, right? So we're going to call this, we're going to convert it. We're going to make a local variable called string data, data. And we're going to say that that is, or we'll call this, I don't know, we can call this the property array, which might be better, property array. And the property array is going to be, we're going to take our data, and we know it's a string, and we're going to split it like we've seen before, and we're going to use the comma to split it. So we're going to say, if we see a comma inside the data, for every comma, we're going to separate it into an array of, of different segments, if you will. So, example, in here I've separated the data into 3 little pieces, right? Full name, contact number, and email address. And what I'm going to do is when I read it back in, I'm going to look for the commas and then separate it back out into an array, a property array, right? And then after I have it as a property array, I'm going to assign the values of the property array back into the property. So I'm going to say one by one. So I'm going to say this dot m underscore full name, or just full name by itself, is equal to property array 0, right? Because that's the first element of the property array, because that's how I've serialized it. That's how I'm going to deserialize it. I'm making a custom way of doing it for this particular class. And every class might have its own way if I had other classes like this. And then this dot, contact number is equal to property array, as an example, 1, right? And this dot email address is equal to property array 2, right? So again, all I'm doing is taking the property array, I'm creating it by taking the data that I get into the function, splitting it across commas, creating an array of strings, and then taking each of the strings from the array and assigning them to the values. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay. I would use the, Nicholas is asking, what should I use m underscore email, or what should I use? I recommend using the properties as opposed to direct access. Having direct access to the data members, you have no control of what's happening. But if I use the properties, I can log that I've accessed the properties, whether I've added to them or I've accessed them as a setter or a getter. I can actually log it because each of these getters and setters is a function, so they can do more than just this, right? And that's why getters and setters is the preferred methodology when it comes to programming, at least object-oriented programming. It's a little bit more cumbersome at first, and if you're using this, these are kind of like the ambassadors, if you will, of the almost like the middleman of the data members, right? Because the data members that we made were in the constructor function, right? M underscore full name is actually the data member, but we're making an actual thing on the outside. Yeah, here it is. Here's the serialize and deserialize. Okay, so that you should have this kind of thing. These are kind of things that we've kind of created, and we haven't used them yet, but we're going to in a second. So first thing is we're just kind of setting things up. We're setting up the ability for us to encode and decode. All right, we're encoding a piece of data, and then we're encoding a piece of data and then decoding the data back into the class. All right, so we can use it properly. JSON is going to be there as a convenience method more than anything else, the JSON data, because we're not going to really use that now, but maybe in the future we'll be able to use it when it comes to using MongoDB later on this semester. Okay, so we'll see how that works. All right, so toJSON, serialize, deserialize. We also have this other thing, which is toString, and we might as well add some code here. So I can say something like, just like we did before, this method overrides the built-in toString method for the contact class. And what this does is it returns a string. So we can make that return a string, doesn't take anything, and it is definitely a member of contact. Okay, so that's how it looks. So now that we've done this, if I go back to my app.js, actually, let's put this up on GitHub for you guys so you have this just in case you haven't been able to type this or whatever. Let's put this up on GitHub. So I'll say git add dot git commit -m, and then we'll say something like added convenience methods, or serialization methods to the contact class, because that's what we really done. And then git add dot, what happened? Git commit is not a git command. Oh, I have extra M's. I was like, what? There we go. And then git push, and that's going to push everything up to the origin remote. Okay, so that's where you should have everything up online right now. All right, cool. So this is the first step. Second step now is using this and testing it. So first of all, let's go back to my app.js. And at the bottom of my app.js, where I have my display contact, and I do a console log of contact toString, let's do a contact.serialize and see what that looks like. So contact.serialize. And by the way, if I hover over serialize, when I get that really neat little thing, it says it's a method, right? And it says this tells me what it is. This method converts the contact into a comma-separated value string. Nice and useful. And it also returns string. It tells you what it returns. And if I do the same thing with deserialize later on, which we're going to see, it'll tell me what it does as well. So kind of neat. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to go back to our contact us page, and we'll say something like Tom Smith and 165555555 and Tom at example.com, and send that data, right? So there we go. Tom Smith, comma separated values as we expect. I want this now to go into storage. So this is the next step. So in my application, again, I can do local storage or session storage. We're going to use local storage, but it'll persist the next time we get together as well. So I don't have to do this again. But local session storage is perfectly acceptable as well, especially if you don't care to persist the data over multiple sessions. Okay, so if you just want to do it one time, you want to use something, and then then it's gone. A good example of this is if you want to store things like username and password. The person's logged in, and you want to store their username in session storage. That's okay. One thing to note here is we are not encrypting this in any way, and it's going to be in clear text format. Clear text format means I can read the key and I can read the value, and I can play with it. I can take it once I know the key and value. I can do stuff. And so later on, maybe in this semester, we'll talk about how to encrypt it. So when we actually, serialize it, we just don't just serialize it, we encrypt it. And then what we can do is we can use a decryption methodology to decrypt it back into something that's usable in the class. Okay, so kind of encrypting and decrypting, because right now it's going to be clear text. Okay, so cool. So I want to do this, and the way I want to do this is right in here. So instead of contact deserialize, we don't have to see this in the console anymore, right? I have a new contact. I made it. And then what I want to do is I want to go in here and I want to say something like, so my contact format is actually going to be giving us the ability to add contacts to my storage for now. I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's not really a contact form, but it's okay. Okay, so let's see how this works. So we're going to say something like local storage. And by the way, local storage is part of window, just like console is. So if I go window dot, and if I start typing local storage, that's where it comes from. But we don't need window because it's implied. We can just use local storage dot, and there's a few items: set item, get item, remove item, and clear. Okay, so we're going to set item in this case, and the items we need to set is there's two parts: a key, which is a string, and a value, which is also a string. So I don't have a key in my contact. I don't have a key, right? And my contacts don't keep track of other contacts that have been created in the list. So what I'm going to do just for this example, right, is I want to create a contact key based on the number of keys that are in the local storage. So I'm going to say something like, okay, so I want to take the local storage and I want to get the length of the local storage. This counts how many keys or objects are in local storage, right? I want to add one to it. So whatever local storage is in there, I'll add 1. And then I want to take this whole thing, put it in brackets, and I want to convert it to string. So this converts it to a string that I can use. Okay. Then that's the first part. Then the next thing is I want to take the value that I want to set in the local storage, which is contact.serialize. And this is why we created that serialize method in the first place. So again, local storage, it's web storage, can be on your browser, and I'm going to inject data into local storage that will persist between sessions. Even if I close my browser down and I open it up again, it'll be there, right? Unless the user, like me, if I go and clear my cache or something, or I literally right-click and delete storage that's in that site, because I have the ability to do that, of course. Okay, so set item again. I'm going to set the local storage length plus 1. So for example, now it's 0. 0 plus 1 is going to be 1. I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add. It's going to start counting by 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of. It's not going to be 0-based counting in this case. Okay, just letting you know the way I've done it. If I wanted to make it 0-based counting, I could say that if I can make an if statement saying something like if local storage.length is 0, then my key is 0, right? I can start with 0, and then if I add 1, I can say, as an example, my local storage.length -1, and I can keep on, kind of adding 1 at a time instead of the way I'm doing it right here. Okay, so if it's greater than 0, then I can make it -1, and so on. And this way, it could simulate 0-based counting. I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to add 1 to local storage length, and then store my contact in there. Let's do that. So I'm going to save this and go back to full name, and let's add the first contact, which will be me. So let's say Tom, and then you can add yourself and my email address that we're going to use here. Okay, and if I click send, then boom. Oh man, what happened here? How can I add like all these Toms in there? Well, remember what we did? We said that, by the way, this is going to keep adding Toms because this isn't clearing. We said that we want to prevent default behavior. So because we prevent the default behavior in my form, it's going to keep adding, your contact perhaps multiple times. We don't need to prevent default behavior anymore because we're taking care of it. We're taking care of the data. So let's delete, as an example. So we can delete each one, right? Individually like this. You can also, I think there's a way of deleting the whole thing. Yours is showing the string literal. Okay, we're going to go back to that in a sec. Is it showing it down here? Because this is, whenever you click on it, it'll show the string literal down here. Yeah, that's what it is. This is good. So this is actually showing what it should be, but up here is the value. So that's the value. All right, so that is the first contact, but we realized, so this is how it should look. Here is the value, and here is the string. That's how it should look. Okay, that's how it should look. So again, going back, the reason why yours might look different is your serialization method may be slightly different than mine. Okay, but again, take a look online and compare yours to mine to make sure that what you did and what I did are the same. I want to get rid of event prevent default. So I want to get rid of this now. Prevent default was there for me to do debugging. I want to turn it back on so I get some good error prevention in my default form, as well as send this to item to local storage once, because then it'll clear it afterwards, right? Which is what I want. Okay, so this is what I want. Save. Let's add the next one. All right, so all I've done is take away the event prevent default. I just commented it out. All right, so let's do the next one. So we've added me, and let's add some superheroes. So Tony Stark. And I'll make him, the real Iron Man at example.com, right? If I can spell example properly. And then send. So you can see, oh man, I got it twice. how is it that I got that twice? And if I press send, look at that. I can press send and I'm going to get empty values in there too. Okay, so we'll do some troubleshooting here. I'm doing this because I want to show you what's happening, why, how this is working, right? So again, there are 2 values instead of 1. Let's delete this. And I got a bunch of empty values. Well, yeah, of course I'm going to get empty values because the user can click send and it'll still generate the form even if this is incorrect. All right. So, and let me show you how that is, right? Because I can say when I click send, even if the form is empty, I'm going to do this contact stuff. I'm going to set the contact and all this stuff. I don't want this to happen. I don't want the contact to be done or anything like that if the form is incomplete or empty. And I'm allowing this to happen because I'm not doing any checking up here, right? As an example as well. Okay, so that is an issue. So first I want to say, let's check to see if my form is complete. So how do I do that? Well, it's if the name of the contact itself is going to read the values, right? So we can read the values. If any one of these values is incomplete, right, as an example, or if the first value, if somehow the person's able to enter the first value and surpass or bypass my form, as an example, that would be bad. And so we want that not to happen. So I'm going to say that if contact.fullname.value, right, as an example, is equal to this, because that is possible. So we don't want that to happen. We want to say if it's not equal, all right, it's not equal to this, empty, right? Then and only then do I want to store, do some local storage. Okay, that's the first thing. So kind of do the first break kind of thing. The other thing is, what if here's something else I want to talk about as well. So I got my full name, and that is going to be my full name, and it's going to be accessed in the form. And again, I've got my message area, which is my attribute class. I'm adding to it. I'm giving this information. I haven't done any other validation, and I could add more validation techniques to prevent this from happening. But what about this local storage stuff? How is it that I'm getting it like happening twice? Shouldn't, right? Should only be clicking once in here. So let's try again. So save, go back to this, and let's add another form. So save. Make sure that when you save, you refresh the screen too. Just one sec, and let's do the next one. So let's do Peter Parker, and my contact number. So 416-555-5557. Let's say some other number, and then the real Spider-Man at example.com. I click send once, and what? No, it didn't work at all, right? It didn't work at all. How is that it didn't work? Well, what are we checking? We're saying that we're going to, if contact.fullname value is not equal to this empty value, right? But at the beginning it is. So can you tell me why you would think that our contact full name is going to be empty at first, and why this isn't working? Think about this for a second, guys. Remember, one thing to note is that the event listener, this add event listener, it doesn't care if this form is complete or not. It has no idea if the validation has passed. It has no idea. And this event listener is going to trigger whether or not the form has passed, right? I'm just letting you know that. So yeah, it stopped everything, but it stopped everything. If my contact full name dot value is not equal to this, it's not going to do it. And because this is going to, I've added the event listener, this event listener is triggering asynchronously, which means that it can happen at any time, including before the data is even complete. So that's a problem, my friends. All right. So if I put this doesn't solve anything. In fact, it causes us to have issues. All right. and again, I'm just printing this. I'm showing you this so that you understand what some of the challenges are for this thing, right? Because I'm kind of putting it in. I'm saying, you know what? I'm adding a new contact. When I add a new contact, as soon as I make a new contact, I want to set my item, right? Let's try it again. So again, I can't undo, but I can do it again. So Peter Parker 416-555-555-8, and then here we go. Spider-Man at example.com, which passes all my tests. If I click send, I get 2. Right? I get 2, and I shouldn't get 2. But the reason why is because my send button, you know, I can, whenever I press my send button, take a look at that. I'm getting 2 sends every time I press send. 2. Why? Why is this happening? Right? You're not getting 2 values, but I'm definitely getting 2 values. And it could be that the way my session is working or whatever, but this is a problem. Anyways, for me, also I spelled example wrong. We haven't done a thing where we edit the objects. So let's just delete these. And I want to prevent this behavior. Look, this is also a problem because I've skipped away from this. It also is something else that's happening. If I go here, it's not allowing me to move from here, which is good. But it does allow me to put in my contact number like empty or 1 number. And email is just checking for an @ symbol. That's all it's doing, right? So something to note. So let's just, and by the way, I can edit the value live. So I can edit the value here. So I can go into local storage and just change my value live in here as well. I can also do that here. I can add a new value in my in local storage directly. All right, so if yours is not working, you can always check with some data by putting it in. But this is a problem, right? If I click send, 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 it's going to keep on adding these values, and I don't want to add empty values. I don't want that, right? So if my values are empty, I don't want to return anything, right? I don't want to return values at all, right? So how can we do that? How can we prevent error prevention again? So my serializing, remember serializing, what it does is it tries to return a string, but it returns a string regardless if the object is empty or not, because if I go back to my contact class, it doesn't do any checking. I don't check when I serialize. I just return something right away, right? I'm not checking to see if my contact is empty, right? If it hasn't been initialized. So I can do that in my serialization. I can say, well, okay, if my contact, as an example, if my, and I can check if they don't have all the data or some of the data, and the only time it's going to return is if I have every piece of data. That's the only time it's going to make a contact, or it can return an error. I can, output an error that says there's something wrong, right? So let's do that. Let's output the error and see what happens. So I'm going to say if, the only way I'm going to return is if I have this full name, this contact number, and this email address with some kind of data other than an empty string. So again, I'm going to say that if this full name, by the way, you probably put in, instead of what I've done here, you can probably put in full name and contact number. That's probably the more polite way of doing it. Since we have a property, we might as well use full names instead of M underscore. M underscore is direct access. So this full name, if this full name is not equal to this, right? And by the way, you can put in a double not equal, which means exactly double not equal, like or triple equals, right? Triple equals means exactly equal. And in JavaScript, just to let you know before I move on, there are there's 2 ways to do comparisons, right? I can do equal equal. Equal equal means if it's the right value, but it doesn't matter if it's a string or if it's a number. If it's a number and I'm listening for a string that looks like a number, it's going to be equal. In other words, I'm just going to put this out. This I'm not going to put this in serialized. I'm just showing you how it works. If I say something like, let my number, right, equal to 1, and let my other number, right, my other number string equal to 1. And if I do a comparison, if I say if my number is equal to my other number string, then something like console log, say true, right? If I did this, and if you test this out, this function, whenever I do serialize, this is going to answer true, guys. Even though one is a number and the other one is a string, the equal operator doesn't check for type. It checks for value. But if I use an equal operator in JavaScript, this is different than in other languages. It checks both the value and the type. Both the value and the type. So that's what I want to do here. I want to check the value and the type is null, which is what I'm saying. I'm saying it's empty. It's an empty string. And other languages have if the string is empty. So you can say like this dot full name dot, and because it's a if I want to check other values, sometimes you can check is empty or whatever in other languages. Here it doesn't really do that because it doesn't have that functionality. There is a string. A lot of times you have a string class that checks that, apply, bind, color, length, and so on. So a string class is different than the actual string data object. All right, so there is a string class, and you can see that you can do other things to the string class, like get the string and the name and so on. But for us, what we want right now, as an example, is just to check to see if my full name is empty, or so any one of these conditions is true. If this is empty, if not empty, and we want to check that this dot contact number, if contact number, and did I make contact number lowercase? Just want to make sure that this is correct. Or did I make contact number uppercase? Oh, look at that. That is a problem. And that's a bug that I missed. So this is not, this is direct access. So I should have said full name and contact number. That's a problem. That's why I'm having a problem. And email address. So uppercase. And this is the same case here. So full name and contact number and email address. That's a little bug I had in here. So full name, that's what this would never work. Contact number and email address. And of course, I'm not getting any code hinting because I'm using JavaScript and not TypeScript. If I was using TypeScript, I'd be getting code hinting all over the place, little underlines that says, Tom, something is wrong, right? So that is an issue. And the same thing goes here. If full name or contact number, and that's why it was failing, because I don't have a full name or whatever, but I want to capture it here, not at outside of my class. I want to do some debugging in here. Oops. I want to do some debugging right in my serialization method because that is a problem. So it's not equal to this, and this dot email address is not equal to this. So if all those things are not equal, right, so they're not empty, then and only then do I want to return something that's serialized, all right? Else, if one of those things is true, I want to return an error, right? I want to return null, right? And JavaScript allows me to do this. It allows me to do null, right? Or undefined, or whatever it's going to be, right? I can also throw an error, right? So I can do something like, before I return null, I can do a console dot error. You can do that. That says something like contact is empty, right? So contact.error, actually, it throws an error, right, for me. It's a console error. This is kind of a way of communicating with the console, right? And I can also check to see if, let's say, one of these things is not, if any one of these things is empty, then I can throw a warning, right? To say that, hey, return this, but also return that. So let's try that one as well. So I'll show you this thing as well, a little bit of thing. So I'll say else if. So if this is not all the case, but let's say one or the other one. So if any one of these, right, as an example, is not good, I can say that. So I can say that instead of and, I can say if any one of these, if this one or this one, you know, is, let me do that. So if this one is equal to, this, right, and or this is equal to, you know, because I'm checking all of these, right? This is not, it should be pipe, double pipe, right? So I'm checking if all these are equal, as an example, so equal, equal, equal. If any one of these is empty, then I can still return it, right, as an example, any one of these. And if I wanted to, and I could say something like console.warn. That's another thing to look at that basically says warning, one or more of your property, of the contact properties, are empty, right? So you can kind of send a warning to the console that sends that as well. So console error, if everything is empty, you know, it would send an error. So if only one of them is empty, it's going to send a warning. So let's try this. So let's try and rejig the thing to say that if all of them are empty. So if this is empty, actually we'll use this line. So if this is equal to empty, every one of them. Okay, so if every one of them is empty, then, you know, contact is empty. It's going to throw an error. Otherwise, it's going to throw a warning. Okay. So a lot of ways to do this stuff. I want to show you what it looks like, right? When I do this kind of stuff, again, it's some kind of error prevention or error communication is what we're doing. It's not perfect at this stage, but it's something where we're communicating with the user or the user of my class that this you know, the serialization is going to potentially fail. All right, let's go back to that. So let's go back to app.js. And so full name, value, contact name value, and then we're going to output contact.serialize. Let's see this if it works again. So let's see if I can put in a value that's empty. So I go on, again, I'll go over here, and then, you know, as an example, I click send, and then it's going to say, okay, and what about my console? What did it do? It says warning, one or more of the contact properties are empty. So notice what I did was, you know, it kind of looked at this and it threw a warning, but it never got to this step, right? And we know why. It never got here, right, to my error, because this one or more of them were empty, right? So it kind of created this, it kind of exited here, returned here, all right, which is not what we want. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like when it's a warning. A warning is yellow, and you can use console warn anytime you want, which is kind of cool, all right? So that is, oh yeah, else if. But this would satisfy requirements. If one of these is empty, it would satisfy first. So let's get rid of this and only have it so that if it's all full or all empty. So if all of them are not empty, or if all of them are empty, right, then it's going to do that. Contact is empty. You can also say if any one of them is empty, else if any one of them is empty, any one of them, if this fails, which is better, one or more, you can have an error, one or more properties of the contact is empty, are empty. One or more properties of the contact are empty, right? Well, actually, it's actually the proper form is. but anyways, is empty. One or more properties of the contact is empty, right? And then we're returning null. Okay, let's see if that works. So again, if I go back to my application, let's clean it up. So I'm going to delete and delete. Can do that. And then if I click send, we're going to have nulls now. Okay, nulls. And yeah, this is good. This is really, really good, right? So, and I'm getting double null. I'm fine with the null. So let's go back and see what it says in the console. So the console is like error, error, right? It's an actual error now that pops up in the console. It shows an error here in the error. We can find it. And this is like a showstopper. It stops your operation from doing anything else after this, right? Because it's an error. I'm throwing an error, if you will. All right, so that is this, but it still doesn't stop anything inside my app.js from doing this, right? So what I could do is I could have a middle step where if my contact serialize is null, right? If my contact.serialize is not null, then I want to do this. So I can do that first. So I can kind of do contact.serialize twice. So I can say if contact.serialize, right? And I'm sending a null. So if it exists, serialize has to be with brackets. If contact.serialize, so I'm checking to see if it exists. So it's not null, right? That's what that means. And let's see if it works now. So if it's not null, then it works. And by the way, we can check to see the other ways we can do this is explicitly say is not equal to null. We can say that too. Check for null. Not equal to would be the right way to do it if I can type without destroying everything I'm doing here. Okay, that's the explicit way of doing it. And we'll try it both ways. So let's see if this works. So if I go back and if I press send, one or more properties of the contact is empty. And if I go to my application, let's get rid of null. So I show you this. I click send, and it doesn't allow me, first of all, to do that. But it also doesn't submit the form anymore. My form is not submitted because of this. But even if I put in a value and go next, right, to my next thing, so I put in like some value like something like Al. My name is Al. And I click send, it's not good enough because one or more values is empty. So it's checking for null. Let's see if I take this null check away. So my contact.serialize, right, local storage set item. Let's see if I'm checking to see if my contact.serialize does exist. That's another thing. So not null, but does exist. That's a different state. And if I click that now, so save this, and then press send. So I put in some values and then click send. Well, that also works. This contact.serialize by itself works, and that's implicitly checking to see if it's a string. By the way, it's supposed to return a string, but it can return null, and that is kind of a weird thing to do, string or null. All right, so that is our guard for making sure that it doesn't happen incorrectly. But the reason why mine might be happening twice compared to yours, it might be another little bug that I have. I'm going to ignore it for now and move on. But that is definitely a bug that I have in my code. And it didn't work, by the way, when I did it last day with the other class. So I'd have to check my code to see what mine does it and yours doesn't. So that's how it is. Let's add one more in there. So we have, Tom. No, this isn't a bug. My thing that adds my extra stuff in here is a bug. I shouldn't be able to add it twice, just once. So example, if I add in Bruce Banner, and my contact number, which is 416-555-5557, you don't have that 7 in there, right? And let's say the real Hulk at example.com, right? As an example, I click send. Notice how I get 2? That's a bug. So that shouldn't show twice. That should only show once, right? So you got to figure why that's happening, right? If I click send again, nothing happens. That's a prevention step. But extra steps for me to put it in twice, that shouldn't happen. I should only be able to put it in once. So somehow my event is triggering twice. My event is triggering twice. And we can check to see why that is. Let's check to see why that is. So, and then I'll do a simple check and move on, because there might be somewhere else where I'm calling the send button. I'm connected to the send button somewhere else. And one of the reasons why I might be submitting twice, as an example, with this button, the click event to be triggering, is maybe that it is a function of my HTML page. No, I want to definitely comment this out. If I don't comment this out, then I have to manage, I would have to manage my clearing. So once I do this, I'd have to clear my form by myself, right? So if I didn't have event default, let's say I put it back in, then this would definitely prevent the default behavior from my form. So this is control. But then what I'd have to do, as soon as I enter everything into local storage, then I'd have to either way clear my form, right? So I have to clear my form. So I'd have to say something like the form that I want to is got to be cleared. So now notice that I have my form. If I said something like document.form, there is a document.forms array, right? And I could specify the first form of my document, and there is no clear method, right? But notice that there's a submit, and there's also a if I try and do cancel, it doesn't exist. But I can control any form on my document by using the forms array. I can have one or more forms. A document has a forms array built into it, right? But what I'd have to do manually, right? Manually, is I'd have to trigger all of those things: full name, contact number, and email address to be cleared. So I have to say something like full name dot value is equal to this, and then contact number. Otherwise, I'm going to have duplicates again. Dot value is equal to this. And sometimes what I'd have to do also is, just because you're asking, is probably make this into a little function, right? This little function here, so it only so I can call it multiple times. So I don't have to copy this over and over again, because I'm preventing default behavior from my click event. So if I did this, just to go through that, and if I went back to this form, and let's add in, so we have Tony Stark, Peter Parker, and Bruce Banner. Let's add in Dr. Strange. So we'll say Stephen Strange, and we'll have a contact number 416-555. What do we have here? 56, 57, 58, 59. All right, and Dr. Strange at example.com, and click send. Then it still adds it twice. So that's what I'm showing you. It doesn't matter. There's something else that's making the event trigger twice. It's almost like I'm registering it twice, which shouldn't be the case. I should only register once. So that is an issue. And it could be some kind of bug somewhere that's doing that. So whether I do it this way, or whether I take away my prevent default and let the form handle, I prefer this way to comment this out for now, because I get some kind of form validation, very simple form validation, but something else is causing this to trigger, this add event listener to trigger. And I'd have to see why. I don't know what it is that caused this problem. So again, if you look at my contact form, that hints might be here, because I have a send button, which is a submit, right? Maybe there's something when something I'm doing that's triggering it to happen twice, right? But I only want to, kind of add it once every time, right? All right, and we'll kind of figure this out after, because again, it's a bug, and I'm not going to spend time. So now that I have some data that's here, right? So I have some data. I want to take this data and I want to use it in a brand new, I want to use it in a brand new page. I want to make a brand new page called Contactlist that's only accessible from the Contact Us page. And we're going to make a little button on the right-hand side here that basically says, show contact list or something like that. Okay, so let's do that. So again, in my contact.html, again, notice where we have our container in main, and then in my my form itself, I have it's inside of a row. Okay, so my form, inside my form is one row or one column, but I can put inside next to my form, so below my form, but inside the div tag that says class row, right? I can make another div that has a class of column, and then let's say large 3, as well as column dash medium 3. I want, let's say, 3 columns on the right hand side. This is after my form, because I'm putting my form in, then after my form I'm going to put it in this. And then inside there, I want a new button, which I'm going to make it as an anchor tag. So an anchor tag, which is going to look like a button dash primary, and then button dash large, right? So that's my anchor tag. Inside the anchor tag, what I want to have is an I tag, right? That has a class of fas.fa, and we want to see what this is. It's like users, let's say, and then .fa large, and then I'm going to press tab. So it gives me this. So I have an href in here, right? And my href is going to be, it's going to go to contact-list.html, which I don't have yet. I'm going to make a contact list HTML in a second. But I don't have this yet. It's going to come. But I'm having a button primary, button large, and the class, the I tag, which is my font awesome class, is FAS, FA users, FA large. And then next to that, I'm going to put in show contact list, which is what that button is going to look like. Okay. So again, I'm using Bootstrap to do this, and then we have to create a the last part is actually creating the page and displaying everything inside of a list, right? So let's do that next. So this is this. Hopefully you guys got this part. And when I go back to my page, then I have a button that's right here, show contact list. So this is my contact, and then show contact list is right here, right? Right now, show contact list goes nowhere because there is no contact list.html, right? So there is none of that. All right, so that's cool. I would need to make a contact list dash HTML form or file, if you will. And the way to do that is to take one of these and copy them. So I'm going to just use the about page and copy and paste. And I'm going to change the about page copy. Let's rename it to contact list.html. I'm using the about page because there's nothing in it. Contact had stuff in it, so it's just faster. I want to change the title to contact list. Okay, definitely want to do that so it looks like it's a contact list. I also want to take away the active link from my about page, because right now my active link in my about page, it'll show that my about page is active, and I don't want that. I want to make it a page that's not active at all. All right, that's one. And then down where it says about us, let's change this from about us to contact list. Contact list, right? And then one thing we also need to know is we have to add in our script tag, because we're probably going to need our contact class. So I'm going to say a script with a source of contact /scripts/contact.js. We need to have that in because otherwise we can't access our contact class at all. All right. So that is what we need for my contact class. So this is the actual place where we're going to put our contact list inside of a new page that we just copied from about.html, and we just made some changes, minor changes. Next, what I need to do is we're going to have an error in our app.js, because our app.js, if you remember, is got a little menu handler, which is this kind of switch case, switches on title. And guess what? I don't have contact list as a title listed here. So I got to add that in. So I'm just going to copy one of them and add that in. And it's going to be contact-list. It's got to be spelled correctly. And then this should be display contact list instead of display contact. I don't have a display contact list function. I need to make this one. So down in here, above my little function start, I'm going to make a new function called display contact list, because that's going to be my new function for my page. Are you with me? Made some changes here, so I know that there's a lot happening all at once, but just, so that you get the flow of what I'm doing here. All right. Just looking at the time. Okay, so yeah, so once we have all this stuff in place, then we can display my contact list and we won't have a problem. It won't error out. So right now it's not going to do anything in that page, but it won't error out. So the way to do that is show my contact list. Hey, contact list is back. And I can go back, but I can go to contacts, but it's going to be in a place where it's only accessible through my contact page. I can go to my contact list. Okay. So that's how it works. One thing to notice, if I go to my contact list and if I look and inspect and go back to application, I still have all my contacts in my local storage. And this is an important piece. All my contacts are still in local storage and I'm good to go. Okay. So what I want to do now is take these contacts from local storage and display them in a table in my contact list. And for that, I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. So get Bootstrap. And under Bootstrap, there is under Docs on the left, there's something called Content. And then further down, there's something called Tables. And then you can see an example of what a table would look like that I want to display. So here's the table that I want to put in. Notice. And this is inside getbootstrap.com under Content Tables. I want to copy this whole thing to the clipboard. This example table right here, which shows me some kind of thing. And let's modify it as I put it in. So let's get back. Let's go back to my contact list.html and let's put some HTML inside of my contact list. So again, it would be div with a class of row, and inside that I want to have div with a class of column. Okay, that's the default that I would recommend. And then press tab, and this is where I'm going to put my table, which I'm going to copy in. This is what the table would look like. T head is just a reminder, is the table head, and T body is where I'm going to have my body. I don't need all of these rows. I only need an example of one that I'm not even going to put here. I'm going to take this example of one row and I'm going to do this programmatically with JavaScript. All right. So again, we've got our scope column, and what we're going to do in here is we're going to say that this is the number. Number's okay. Right? This is kind of like our number in our ID, if you will, or our key. Let's put it like, we'll call this ID. So the contact ID. And this will be our full name. And this will be our contact number. And this will be our email address. So this is setting up our, our table. And let's just put on some dummy data in here. So this would be like row 1. And let's put some information, like say, for example, Peter Parker. This is what it would look like with a contact number of 416-555-5557. I don't know, whatever it would be. And my email address for Peter Parker is like, let's say, spiderman@example.com, right? So that's what it's going to look like. Let's see what this looks like on the contact list. Okay, so if I save this back to the contact list, then it should look like this. Okay, so that's what it kind of looks like. And this is what our data is going to look like when it comes in here. All right, are you with me? So again, all I've done is I've taken a table from Bootstrap and I've embedded it in my contact list. I've just given one dummy piece of data so I can test to see what it looks like. And I put it inside of my contact list.html, right, with one row. So TR is a table row. That's what this means. And this is table data, TD. Table data, all right? So this is like columns. These are all the columns, right? This is a row. These are the column data, a piece of data there in the columns. And again, this is the header. This is the header row, if you will. And this is each of the header areas for the columns, column. All right, so that's what this is. Great. I need a hook to get me into this. I want to replace this data here with my own. So in my T body, I want to make a hook an ID of contact list. I'm going to put that in there. That's my hook as an example. Okay, so that's my example for this. Thanks, Nick. So once I have my example, once I have this ID, what I want to do is I want to cut this out. So I'm not going to even have any table data at all in my the body of my table. It's just going to be blank. But I want to inject it with JavaScript. I want to inject it with JavaScript. So going back to my JavaScript now, into my app.js, in my display contact list function, the new one I just made, right? What I want to do is I want to get a hook to my contact list. I'm going to say contact list is equal to document dot get element by ID contact list. So this gives me a kind of a reference to the contact list ID. Wherever my element is, where this contact list ID sits, is where I'm going to get the reference. And what I want to do for now, let's put in some dummy data again. So I'm going to say that contact list, right, dot inner HTML is equal to, and we'll put in some a template string, and I'm going to just copy in my table information like so. So this is the table. This is how the table information is going to be copied into my contact list. Okay. So right now you see that Peter Parker, whatever. Let's change Peter Parker to something else just to show you that it's going to be different. Let's put Tom Smith in here, just so that you see that what's going to happen. So you see I'm not lying. Tom Smith at example.com. So if I save this now and I go back out to my table, you can see that what should be here, instead of my contact list, let's make sure that I've saved everything. Save. And where's my contact list? Save. I want to save this. And if I go back, you should see Tom Smith. So all I've done is inject Tom Smith in here, right through JavaScript. So here's JavaScript. Say my app.js. I basically said, hey, get a hook to the contact list table and then inject this. So I want to do this, but I want to read all the data that I have from my local storage. So what I can do is I can say, okay, cool. If we're going to make a check to see if local storage dot length is greater than 0. So we know that there's something in there. Okay, if and only if it's greater than 0. Then what I want to do is, for however long the local storage is, I want to run a for loop. So I want to do a for loop, and I want to say that, notice, by the way, I just used the for loop. There's 2 for loops here. If I pull it up inside of Visual Studio Code, one of them that looks like this, and the other one that has a little box like this, that's a code block. And if I click onto this, it'll actually generate my for loop for me. So for let index is equal to 0, well, we don't want to start at 0. We want to start at 1, right? Because we are for us, everything starts at 1. This is for our table. In the future, we may want to make it so it's 0-based counting, but for now, it's not. This is going to be from 1 to our local storage, right? As an example, -1, right? So if it is greater than 0, now if it's only 1, is this going to work? Think about this, right? So I start at 1, or index is equal to 1, and it's going to try and do the loop, right? And then if my local storage is 1, if I have 1, then, you know, it's going to go start at 1 and keep going. If I did it this way, or I could start at 0, and I can say as long as my local storage is less than the length of my local storage, then loop, and then change my index here, which is probably where I can go. So let's see how this works. So then I want to get the item from local storage. I want to say that I want to have some kind of data string, right? So we'll say that let data, the data that I have, I want to make that equal to a string, and let's put that inside the check. So I'll put that inside the check before my for loop. because we don't want to do this outside of my for loop. So inside my for loop, it's going to say let data is equal to this. In fact, let's not even do this. Let's not even do get a hook if local storage is not greater than 1. So we're going to say that we're only going to do this contact list if my data is greater than 1. All right, my length of the data. A little bit of error prevention. All right. So I'm going to say if let my data string be equal to nothing, null first. And then what I'm going to say is data temporarily, right, is equal to local storage dot get item. And my key is going to be my index, whatever my index is, 0, right, plus 1. Right? So it's going to be, if it's 1, if it's 0, it's going to be 1. If it's 1, it's going to be 2, and so on. Okay? Index plus 1. And I'm going to convert that to string because I need to make sure that that's a string when it goes into the get item key. And then from there, I want to get my item, which is the actual item itself. Right? So that is the item. Get the item. And it's going to store it in data, my data string. Right? But I don't want to just add it to data once. I don't want it to replace it. I want to plus equals it, to the data that I want, right? I want to be able to get that item and I want to do something with it, right? So instead of my data being here, let's make a new contact, right, that I want to serialize. So let's say we'll call this contact data. So let's say that this is, follow me here, let's say contact data is equal to this, which is going to be a string. I'm going to get a string back from my local storage. And then I want to deserialize it into a new contact. So I'm going to say let contact is equal to a new contact, a new empty contact. And then what I want is for my contact to deserialize this data by passing in the contact data. So several steps. One thing is I want to get a reference to my contact list. I want to set up an empty data object that I'm going to add to later on, right? I want to make a for loop that goes from 0 to my local storage dot length. That would be nice if I didn't put that in. To my local storage dot length, all right? And then I'm going to set up my contact data as I'm going to look at my index, whatever my index is, plus 1. Convert it to string, and that is going to be my key that I'm going to return the data from local storage and store it in my contact data. But now it's still a string and it's serialized. I need to create a new contact, deserialize that data, which splits it up and puts it into contact full name, contact number, and contact email address. And now I can take that information and inject it into this, right? So let's take this piece and put that down in here. But instead of contact.inner HTML being this, right? And this is going to be done, inside the if statement, but outside the for loop, right? I want to say that contactlist.inner HTML, right? That's going to equal to my data. And this piece right here is going to be something that I want to add to my data, right? So this is my at the end, after I've looked at local storage and gone through each of the items, I want to add my data to my inner HTML. But in here, I want to say something like data is plus equals to this, plus equal to this. But instead of injecting this dummy data, I want to say that this is going to be my index. So again, I can say $ index plus 1, whatever that is, index plus 1. This one is going to be $ contact dot full name, right? And this one is going to be $ contact dot contact number. And finally, this part is going to be contact dot email address. Are you with me? Before we go on, I'm just going to make this so that it is formatted properly. So again, I can just kind of select all this, right click and format selection, which is going to format it slightly wrong for me, but I can take away the curlies and put them where they're supposed to be in the right order, just so you can see things properly. Are you with me? So check mark if you're with me, X if you're not. And I can slow down. I got one check mark. I got Nicholas is with me, but rest, I don't see that you're with me. So what is this doing? Let's just go through it again. So again, I check to see if my local storage is not empty. The next thing I do is I say, let's get a reference to the contact list element on the page, which in my contact list's case is right here in the body. This is the body element, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty data string. That's what this is. There's an empty data string at the beginning, which I'm going to add to every loop. For every row, I'm going to add to the data string. So all I'm doing is adding another table row, another table row, another table row every single time I pass through here, okay? And then what I'm going to do is in my for loop, I'm going to check to go between 0 and my local storage length. So let's say I'm going to only loop that many times. I'm going to get the contact data from the local storage from each item in the local storage by using my index +1, because I'm not using zero-based counting. Otherwise, I could just use index if I was doing that originally. So there's a bit of an offset there. Then I'm going to create a new contact. Here's my new contact. And I'm going to immediately deserialize the contact data that I got from local storage. And remember my deserialize method, it just splits up the comma separated values into their properties. And then I'm going to return those properties from the contact each time. So remember, each loop, it's going to wipe out the contact and make a new one. Wipe out the contact and make a new one. It's going to destroy this. It's only the scope for the contact is inside each of the loops. Every time it loops, it's going to create the contact and destroy it, right? Once the loop finishes, after this little code block, the contact no longer lives. I'm using let, right? And then I'm going to take the data that I got up here and add a table row in what looks like a template string. That's what I'm using, a template string, which I talked about that I would be using before. One thing we don't need is the extra value in here, and it's going to format this on the HTML side. Weird, but HTML doesn't care what the document looks like. It can be compressed for all it cares, as long as the data is correct. All right, let's see if I messed up and if I didn't do anything, if I did something wrong. So go back to my thing, and what's going on here? How come, I've got a bunch of empty data? What happened? So key is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's in weird order. So here is the contact list. Inner HTML is equal to data, right? This is the data. So it did add a bunch of things. Let's take a look at the rows here. So let's inspect and see what we did wrong. So again, I'm reading from local storage, right? So let's go into my console and see if there's an error. No errors in the console. So application looks okay. Something is wrong. Let's go into elements and inspect each of the elements and see what we got. So in the body, I'm going to go into the main. And in the div tag, I'm going to have a row and a column. And here's my table. And there's my table head in my body. And I've got a bunch of empty rows. Look at that. So all the data that's in here is empty. I'm not deserializing properly. It's there. Look, I count 1, 2, 3. These are correct. What I've done here is correctly count. But when I get an item, local storage get item, and I'm getting this item, what is the contact data that I'm getting? Contact data is what I want to send to to deserialize. So let's see if I'm getting the contact data. So I'm going to console out. Console .log, and I want contact data is what I want. I want to output the contact data because it's in there, but I want to see what it is. And let's see what my console. So here's all my data. See, I'm getting all my data, right? So maybe it's my deserialize method that's not working properly, because my data, well, it's going in, my contact is there, but this somehow my contact.deserialize contact data it's not proper, or something that my contact at full name, contact number, and email address, whatever that's outputting is wrong. One of the two. So let's see what's happening with my deserialize step. So go to definition. And here's my deserialize. Let's check to see if this is okay. So I let the property array work. Here's deserialize. I get my data inbound. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Look at this. I made a mistake. It's an error. Full name, contact number, email address. Remember I was talking about that? That's see, TypeScript would have said, Tom, what are you doing? There is no lowercase f, full name and lowercase contact name, but JavaScript doesn't complain, my friends. So now if I save and if I go back, I got my data. So again, a bit of troubleshooting, but we mission accomplished, right? So to some degree, and we don't need this little output anymore. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub and I'll explain everything one more time. So git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added contact list. Git push. And that'll be everything you need. So this is what you need for your in-class exercise this week. So a couple of screenshots. One screenshot that you should have is a screenshot of your most likely your contact list, your contact us page, maybe entering some data and showing me your application, how you've got some information in your application, right, in the application area, something like this. You can make your own information up with maybe a show contact list button. When I click the show contact list button, you should show this data. That's another screenshot. And that would kind of show me that you're able to do what I've done. Just to prettify things before we leave, because this is nice, but I'd want to add a couple of additional Bootstrap classes to this one. Let's do that inside of my contact list.html just to make it nicer. So we can say table dash striped, table dash bordered, right? Table dash hover. So table striped, table bordered, table hover. And if I did that, if I did everything correctly, then now it should look like this. And if I wanted to make this part right here a different color, again, you can go to Tables Bootstrap. They have a lot of really cool things that you can do. So you can say, here's my table class primary, or on rows, or on cells, you know, as an example. So you can say my row, table primary, table secondary, table dark. So I can say table dark on my header row. Let's try that out. So on my header row, so this is my T head. Let's see if I can put table dark in here. So I can say class, and that is, like it says here, table dash dark, table dash dark. See if that works. And if I get my table dark, so it looks nice, right? So you can make it really look nice. And again, it's even responsive. So if I was to take this into some kind of responsive design, it will stretch to fill to some degree. It's not perfect. So what are next steps? What do we want to do next? What we want to do is be able to delete data from my table and edit data from my table. And I'm going to do that with you guys with JavaScript next week. All right, so any questions at all before we move on? Your table doesn't show any data. Yeah, so again, if I go back to my, you don't think you're adding the contact list property. All right, so if you go back to app.js, in my app.js, you can see that this is what my display contact list looks like. So make sure that yours looks like mine. The thing to have is, there's a bunch of checks here. One of them is, does your deserialize work? You know, are you adding in all of these properties properly? Are you hooking in to your table properly by using some kind of selector? I'm using contact list, document.getElementById, and all those kind of things. And I'm going to put this up on GitHub one more time because I made some changes. So I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m. I'll say added we basically we added layout changes to table in Contactlist. Done. So you should have everything that I have. You don't think my selector is finding it properly. So make sure that your selector, which is Contactlist, I put in camel case, Contactlist. Make sure in your Contactlist that you have that your T body is an ID of Contactlist. One thing also to check is what happens with, before we go, and then I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to say goodbye in a second. But let's check one thing. What happens in our funny other browser, Firefox? Jackie reminded me just when I saw your name. I'm like, what about Firefox? So one thing to note in Firefox is if I go to Contact Us, yes, I have my Show Contact List. Great. But if I look at if I inspect element like we've done before, and one thing to note, I have to go applications way over here. And it doesn't say that there are any service workers or manifest. Here's storage on Firefox. It's a little different. And you can see that I have session storage, right? But there isn't any, local storage. If I look at local storage, because we've never done this, right, kind of thing, here is all the local storage for here. Let's see if we can add some stuff to local storage. So we'll say Tom. And what happens with Firefox? Does it work? So I could click send, right? And what happened? so it worked nicely as an example in Chrome, but in Firefox, it's a no-go. And if I go to show contact list, it doesn't show my storage, but it shows it here. So I did it, but when I'm inside of my storage, I'm not able to inspect the data right in here. I can't inspect the data, right? Like we did before. So again, that's where I like Chrome a little bit more to some degree. Not that Firefox didn't do the job; it worked, right? It's just that I can't see my data in my local storage. I can't see it in any way. Look, no data present for selected host. And if I refresh, right, as an example, I still don't see anything unless you guys see something different. All right, so that is Firefox. All right, that's it for me today, guys. We talked about, just to recap, we talked about a couple things. We talked about this week, ECMAScript 5, ECMAScript 6, the differences, OOP. We also talked about local storage today and session storage and how to store context there, how to add stuff to local storage, remove it. We talked about serialization and deserialization techniques, how to encode and decode data. As an example, and we used a class to do it, an object-oriented, class that we made to create data, store data, retrieve data, all those kind of things. So far is what we've done. We made a new contact list, and we were able to dynamically grab the data from our local storage, which is kind of like a little temporary spot for us, and then display the data on our page. And you should also try another test for yourself. What if I added an extra piece of data now, what will it look like? So for example, if I went to my contact list and I said, let's add a new superhero, which is not in Marvel. We'll say, Clark Kent. I know I'm breaking the mold here. 416-555-5550 and Superman at example.com. Now, remember, I had double data for me, so you're going to see it twice, right? So send, as an example, show my contact list, and here's Clark Kent right here and Superman, right? So Superman gets added dynamically at the end, which is kind of cool. So it adds it immediately, right? So next week, what we're going to do is we're going to go through here, and when I'm going to have these little buttons that we don't see here right now that are going to say edit and delete. And I'm going to try and make it with you so I can edit the data that I see here or delete the data from local storage, and then update local storage so that the IDs make sense. That's going to be interesting because right now we're just getting local storage as an example. We're creating each item in local storage. Can I go back to the app.js? Yes, I'm going to stop broadcasting on the internet now, but yes, I will. Guys, for the people who are watching live, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week. All right, and let's just